So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us. We're really excited, as you can see, or you will be able to see in a moment when Bobby speaks. He's outdoors for the live portion of our outdoor segment. And we hope you all enjoyed his segment last week on tree identification in winter and spring. We intend to bring these to you each week, alternating that pre-recorded format that you already saw with the live class that we'll have the following week as we are today. And the intention is for you and your students to be able to get outdoors, follow Bobby's teaching, and then come share with us the following week and ask your questions of Bobby too. But of course, we want to hear from you about what you found while you were out tree IDing today. A couple quick notes. If you are watching this on YouTube Live or on Kingdom Access Television or your local cable access, you can email me your questions and we'll ask them during today's class or at our next class. And that email address is dbush, B-U-S-H, at fairbanksmuseum.org. So feel free to email me anytime you have a question, whether it's before, during, or after class. If you're in our Zoom meeting today, of course, you probably know this by now, but at the bottom of your screen, when you move your cursor, you'll see a Q&A button, and that button will allow you to ask questions today. So you can actually type in your questions. You can even type them in anonymously, and I will ask them of Bobby for you. If we get a lot of questions, we may answer a few of them in written form. So make sure you check back and look at that Q&A box as well. But we'll do our best to hit them all live today during class. And then to the right of that, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat button. So that's a great place for you to chat with us. If Bobby has questions for you, or if you just have other ideas and you want to chat, we welcome you to do so in there. Of course, we will be video recording today's class, so we just want you to be aware of that as we start today. And thank you everybody for joining us, whether you're on YouTube or on Zoom or on cable access. We're excited to have you here this afternoon, and we're excited to keep going with this outdoor series with Bobby Farlice-Rubio, who I will turn things over to now.
All right, thank you, Drew. And to those of you out there, I hope all of you had a chance to watch the tree identification video, but if not, it's still online. And of course, you can learn a lot here too, and then go watch it afterwards. But that is what the goal of our new program is, to get you to go outside and look for the things that we talk about. And then here we can share what you found. So I would love to know off the top if there's any questions from anyone who watched the video. Were you able to see the trees that I talked about? Maybe you already knew about some of them, and maybe some of them were new to you. And one thing that I do know is that I did not cover every tree that grows around here. There's so many more species, and I hope to add them on as we continue to make this outdoor series. So if you have suggestions for trees that you want me to help you identify, maybe you'd like for me to go out and look for a particular species, this is the chance that you have to request that. But until I get any questions, I actually was able to set up my computer outside, which is a little more complicated than I expected. But one of the reasons why I'm out here, I already see a request for ash. Yes, ash was the top of the list of things that I wanted to include that I didn't fit in, but I knew that I would get to the white ash. And hopefully, if I'm lucky, somebody can point out where I can find some black ash, which have become more rare in our region. Black ash is the traditional basket-making tree from the native peoples of this land. And white ash is actually much more common. And unfortunately, white ash is the one that's vulnerable to the emerald ash borer. So ash trees are going to be featured, and I might use them as a way to talk about the invasive species, the emerald ash borer. So the ash trees might get a little more attention than any other species might get. And the yew trees. Now, I know what yews look like, but I don't know of a lot of them around here. However, if I find them, and of course, you folks out there are more than welcome to contact us. If you know of places where there are trees that you would like me to feature in a video, you're welcome to tell me, and we can keep our safe social distance and also add more species. Hopefully, by the end of all of this, we'll have a library of videos that you can watch and learn about almost every tree in this region. That's my goal eventually. So thank you, Greg, Sam, and Maria, for requesting ash and yew. I'm certainly going to put that on the list of trees that I try to find. So unless there's any other questions, I thought I would show you guys something that's right behind me. I got to walk the computer out here. I'm walking on pretty rough ground here, but if you look right here is a tree that I bet some of you watching can name. I want you to name it because for a guy like me, it's a little awkward sometime to name this. Are there any Douglas firs? I just saw a question pop up. Douglas firs are a Western tree. So if you go out to the mountains of the West Coast in Washington, Oregon, and parts of California, that's where you'll see Douglas firs. We have balsam fir here in Vermont. That's the only fir that grows in our region. So, but does anybody out there know what this is called? I'm going to wait a second before I say the name. This is a tree that flowers very early. And if you look, you can see that the flowers at this moment look a little bit like kitty tails, cat feet, the paws of a kitten. Anybody want to guess? Nobody? Come on, you're going to make me say it? Yes, this is a pussy willow. And I know that because of our language, that word has a lot of other meanings, but in this case, we're talking about the cat. And this is because it looks like it's fuzzy. And this is a flower, but here's the little bit of ironic thing of trees have a gender sometimes. So that's an interesting thing to think about. And I have a male willow that grows right behind my house. And I have not found a female in this vicinity right here, but I'm sure to find one in the next few days as they're flowering also at the same time. And if you watch these willow flowers, you will see that they will grow quickly from this little fuzzy toe into something that has a lot of grains of pollen sticking out. And then you'll see the stamens and then you'll know what it is. Drew, I have a question.
Yeah, one person emailed with a question, just wondering, are those rare where we live, or are they just found in specific kinds of habitats?
These are not rare at all, but willows altogether love water. So if you haven't seen willows in your yard, I suggest you go to a wetland, a swamp, a pond, a brook, even a stream. If there's a lot of sunshine, because willows don't like to grow in the shade, but if there's a lot of sunshine and water, you're likely to find willows on the banks. And now the buds have opened, but let me see if I can get this kind of detail. If you look at the bud here that has a little flower on it, that little bud is a single scale. If you remember the flower buds and the leaf buds that we talked about on the video, you may have noticed that a lot of the scales on the buds were like multi-plated, kind of like reptile scales. They were like overlapping shingles or tiles. Well, when it comes to the willow trees, this is something unique to the willows. They have one single scale on their buds. So you could say their bud is a much more simple shield as opposed to a complex woven basket of scales that kind of protects them. And willows are very diverse. I can't even tell you which species of willow that is because we have dozens of species of willows and they hybridize. They have an enormously large gene pool. And so if you see willows in one place, they might be a slightly different species than the ones that you'd see on the other side of the hill. And that's why when you see willows listed in a tree book, they don't put a specific species. They just put Salix, which is the genus of willows. Salix, by the way, Salix is connected to salicylic acid. Has anybody heard of that? There is a very famous medicine made from the bark of willow trees, aspirin. So salicylic acid is the main ingredient of aspirin, and aspirin and salicylic acid come from Salix trees. Salix is the genus of willows. There is a kind of willow that you might see growing around towns in Vermont that's actually native to Asia. It's called the weeping willow, and that is actually Salix babylonica. So think of ancient Babylon and the weeping by the rivers of Babylon, and then you can remember the weeping willow, but that's not native to Vermont. This is a native species. Drew, we have another question.
Yeah, question for Maria. How many other flower trees are there out there?
Well, every tree flowers in some way or another. The basic distinction is the conifers, which have their cones, and that is actually it doesn't look like a flower, but that is what does the job of a flower. Some cones produce pollen and some cones produce seeds. So think of that analogy, the cone as the sort of the original type of flower. And then we have more recently on Earth, I'm talking about, you know, millions of years later than the conifers, we had flowering plants like this willow and the ones that I showed you in the video, like maples, and also all of them, the poplars. As a matter of fact, I might pull up a section from the video that I made before. There's the willow behind me, in case you're wondering, because there's a section in the video where I feature a poplar tree. That poplar tree is out of reach for me to reach with my Ethernet cable. But if you give me a second, I'm gonna find that section of the video where I talk about a poplar having flowers, because you might notice that the poplar flowers are gonna look a lot like, oh, here we go. Hold on a second. Let me share a screen with you with a video from last week. And right there, if you can see, right there is the fuzzy little flower on a different species of tree. So to answer Maria's question, poplars and willows, because of the fact that they flower so early, have fuzzy flowers which provide them with insulation to prevent them from freezing on these cold nights that we have, so that they can continue to bloom on the warm days. So these are plants that are taking advantage of the fact that there aren't a lot of other plants flowering now. And by flowering early, there's less competition for pollen, you could say. They don't have to worry about getting all the pollen of other species. The pollen that they get will be their own species, because pretty much they are the only ones flowering at this time of year. So other trees can flower later in the year. Think of an apple that flowers in May, and then it takes all summer to make that fruit. Oh, did you stop the share of screen there, Drew? Oh, it looks like the video came down, but I hope you guys can still see me. So are there any other questions? I lost you, Drew. I don't know. Are you still there?
I'm here, Bobby.
All right. Well, I just, for some reason, the video stopped sharing, and I didn't know if you had done that.
Oh, or... you could reshare it and play it for sure.
Yeah. So let's see. I don't know if you can. That's a poplar tree's bark. That it has smoother bark when the wood is younger. This is a twig from a quaking aspen, what most Vermonters would call a pop. And you can see that it are little sharp horn-shaped leaf buds. But what's amazing is that even though it's still March and there's still snow on the ground, its early flowers are starting to emerge. This is one of the trees that flowers earliest in the year. So I'll stop it there. But so there's something funny about that. But one of the things I want you to notice in that short clip that I showed you is when you look at the leaf buds next to the flower buds, you notice that they were made of overlapping scales. So if you saw those flowers and you see the overlapping scales, you know it can't be a willow. It's got to be a poplar. And I didn't mention this in the video, but there are actually several species of populus. We have not just the quaking aspen, which is the most common one. We also have big tooth aspen, which is not a colonial tree like the quaking aspen is. It's usually just a single tree instead of like a whole colony of trees. And then we also have one of my favorite smells. It's called balsam poplar. I know this is confusing because there's also balsam fir, which is a conifer, an evergreen, but balsam poplar, which is not an evergreen, not a conifer, has these buds that are very oily, and they're rich with something that in old days was called the balm of Gilead. It was an oil that was used as a salve for medicinal purposes. And I really think people liked it just because it smelled a particular way. I love that smell. I know people who hate it. So make that a quest for yourself. If you can find balsam poplar, you don't need to wait until spring or summer for the buds to smell strongly. Even in the middle of the winter, if you grab a leaf bud off of a balsam poplar, you will know that it's different from the other trees because the bud will be greasy. It'll be oily and it'll leave a smell on your fingers. Most of the other buds will seem dry and they'll break apart and be kind of dry and crumbly. But the balsam poplar's twigs, their buds are very distinctive. And maybe that tree will be featured in our next video. I wish I could convey the smell through the video camera, but that's something you're going to have to find for yourself.
So hang in there for a moment, everybody. I think Bobby maybe just is outside where the internet is a little bit weak. So we'll just see if he comes back with us in a moment. Feel free to keep typing your questions either in email form to me or in our chat or Q&A boxes. We'll see. Oh, so it looks like we may have just lost Bobby, but I was glad that we were able to get to at least a few questions here today. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today for Outdoors with Bobby Farlice-Rubio. We'll, of course, work on the technical side of this for our next class, but next week, make sure you check fairbanksmuseum.org, in particular our virtual learning page or our Facebook, where you'll see Bobby's next video that takes you outdoors. So that will be a pre-recorded video that you can watch. And then the following week, we'll hold another live session like this one, and you'll be able to ask questions again of Bobby and to check in with him on your own adventures. So thank you again for everybody who joined us on Kingdom Access Television, in Zoom, or perhaps even on our YouTube live stream. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.